It's Tuesday, it is!
Hey everyone, it's Mimi and Weezes.
Hey guys, what's good?
So, this past weekend, I went and saw the new The Strangers is what it's called?
Yeah.
Chapter 1. I'm not going to give too many spoilers. It's just like another cabin in the woods murder mystery type of thing. But it brought up the conversation of other cabin murders alike. So, in this episode, we're going to cover the Keddie Murders, or Cabin 28 Murders, whichever one you want to call it.
Or the Cabin 28 Massacre.
A quadruple homicide.
It seems planned just from the start.
Yeah. Oh, definitely planned. That's what I think, like, once you start getting into the facts of it all. So, this actually wasn't as long ago as a lot of the cases we've been covering, right? This was in 1981 is when it happened.
It's like, it wasn't the 19th century.
Yeah. But the case is still being talked about and still kind of ongoing up to this day. So, I'll start from the beginning. The victims were Glenna, which we'll call her Sue half the time. She was born in 1945. And her daughter, Tina, her son, John, and then John's friend, who had slept over that night. His name was Dana, or Dana. I'm not sure. I probably should have looked up how to say that, but, you know.
I would assume Dana like Dana White.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's the first thing I thought. The murders took place in Keddie Cabin number 28. That's just what we were saying earlier, and that's why they call it the Cabin 28 Murders. So, the Dana kid, his last name is Wingate, so sometimes you'll hear us saying that. The bodies of Wingate, Sue, and John were found on the morning of April 12th by Sue's other daughter, who was 14 at the time, named Sheila. She had been sleeping at a friend's house that night. Sue's two younger sons, Rick and Greg, and their friend Justin Smart, an important last name, so keep in mind, were also in the house, but guess what? They were not harmed, you guys. Where's little Tina, you may ask?
What happened to Tina?
Missing from the scene.
What? No way, dude. Yeah.
So, Tina was actually a missing person up until 1984. April 1984. So that's 4 years. 3 years, right?
3 years. 3 years. It took them 3 years to find the missing body of this little girl.
But then that brings to question a lot of other stuff, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But, you know, it's why was she gone and why was she missing and the others weren't, you know? But when her remains were found, it was actually her skull and several other bones, and they were at this place called Camp 18. There were no charges filed when it happened. And still to this day, it's technically considered an unsolved murder case. Because they do have suspects, but no one was ever charged, and it was never truly proven. Which
and it was also a really long time ago, if you think about it.
And the police department, like the sheriff's department at the time, they really messed up the whole case based on all the stuff you can read about it.
Yeah.
They didn't take the investigation very seriously, or they just had a lot of, you know, what are we going to call it, slip-ups and mess-ups in the investigation just in general.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of get to how they even ended up in this cabin in the first place, because that's important to the story.
Let's go.
So, July 1979, Sue was originally from Massachusetts, right?
Yes.
She had 5 kids. She left her home in Connecticut at the time after she left her husband, who was named James. They moved to Northern California, where Sue's brother actually lived. His name was Don. Once they got there, they rented like a tiny little trailer. Her brother had actually lived in that before. The next year, or the next fall, she moved to the number 28 cabin, which was like a rural area, but it was way bigger than the little trailer they were living in.
It was considered a resort town.
Yeah, it was like a Keddie resort is what they called it. And so, like, you can look at the pictures. The cabin wasn't tiny, you know what I mean? The cabin had actually been owned by the sheriff of that county before, and he had moved out. So, they resided there. It was her, and let me say all the names again, because there's a ton of kids, right? So it's her oldest daughter, her son, another daughter, right? There's 2 daughters and like 3 sons. There's a ton of them, and then they're like little kids. So like one of them's 5, one of them's 10 at the time. We got a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 15-year-old kid. So we'll continue the story. So on April 11th, 1981, this is around 11:30 a.m. Sue, Sheila, and Greg, that's one of the youngest sons, they drove to one of their friends' house, the Meeks, is what their names are. They went to pick up Rick, the other kid, because he was over there attending baseball tryouts, right? Like, so he's out there living his best life.
For sure.
When they were there, they just happened to bump into John and Dana, the kid, who ends up being a victim at their house later. So they were actually hitchhiking a couple miles away because there was a party. So imagine just seeing your kid hitchhiking and how strange it would be.
Imagine you pick him up, you're like, hey, where you going there, bud?
Mm-hmm. So 2 hours later, the kids hitchhike again. Well, that gives them an alibi for this time period because they were seen like downtown. So that same evening, Sheila had plans to go and spend the night with another family. They lived just next door or across the way, in cabin number 27. So just right next door.
Yeah.
Well, Sue, she stayed home with Rick, Greg, and the boys' other friend, Justin Smart, the one that I told you at the beginning.
For sure.
Sheila left their cabin at 8 p.m. to go sleep at, I think it's pronounced Seabolt. I'm not really sure how to say their last name, but I'm going to just say it how it's spelled. Tina, who had been chilling over there already, right? She's like, asked them, what time is it? And they were like 9:30, and she's like, oh, I got to go back to the cabin. So she came back home. Tina did, not Sheila. Tina.
Damn. So let me just say this. Sheila went because she was gonna stay at this girl's house, right? Their friend. But Tina was already there, and then Tina checked the time. And she's like, "Oh, I gotta go home." Mm-hmm. So Sheila was gonna stay over the night at that friend's house, but Tina didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sus, right?
Yeah.
Sus, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought too. But Tina didn't. Tina came back to the house. So then, that's kind of like the end of that little bit. Like, that's all you need to know, because then all of a sudden it's just a murder case because we don't know anything that happened in the little window in between. So the next morning, that's April 12th at 8 a.m., Sheila decides it's time to go home. She walks in the door and discovers the dead bodies of Sue, John, and Dana in the living room of the house. All 3 had been bound up with medical tape and electric cords, dude. Tina, nowhere to be found. While the other kids, because remember, they were having a sleepover, Rick, Greg, and Justin, they were still found there, physically unharmed, dude, just chilling in another room. Weird.
So you're telling me while these people were getting, murdered, these kids were not hearing anything?
Just chilling?
They were just chilling, I would assume even if a baby is left unattended, it would be screaming. I would imagine some kids would too. Well,
and the kids, it's not like they were 3-year-old kids. It was a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 12-year-old.
Yeah, see? That's weird. No kids are quiet. That's just the law of life. Like, any kid is loud.
Well, and if you hear screaming, the first thing you get up, like, you remember being that, and you hear something, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go see.
Yeah.
And you, like, creep down the hallway.
Immediately, yeah.
And if you heard brutal screaming and someone... See, the screaming might not have been as loud as we're saying because they were all taped up. Remember? So, who knows? But, I mean, you would hear some ruckus, don't you think?
Yeah, all the commotion.
Yeah. Well, anyways, as soon as Sheila went inside, she runs back to the Seabolt's house, and she gets the dad, her friend's dad, and is like, oh my god, everyone's dead. He comes back. He retrieves Rick, Greg, and Justin out of the bedroom window where they were in that room. He later admitted, though, that he did go in, the main area to see if anyone was still alive, so he saw it, and then that could have, they used that to say it could potentially have, contaminated the evidence in the process because he went into that room. Isn't it just okay, well, these people were dead and clearly she ran back? I don't know. Well, the murders of Sue, John, and Dana, though, they were vicious murders. Just 2 knives covered in blood and 1 hammer were found at the scene. There was blood splatter from inside the house, right, that they saw, and it had proven that the murders all happened in that same room, so in the living room. So they weren't running around the house. So these people had to be I don't know why I was covering my mouth, sorry. These people had to be, it almost seems like they had to trust the person who did it, right? To not have tried running away.
That, or they had been doing it for some time now. If you guys, I'm just gonna quote the first movie. If you see the first movie, I've seen the first movie, spoilers if you haven't, it's been so long. But when they basically torture the 2 couple the whole movie, and then they tie them up and kill them at the end, right? That seems so calculated that, you had to have done it 3 or 4 times already. Yeah.
Well, and that's in the new one, and this is going to be lots of spoilers, so maybe, fast forward a minute in. The new one's the same thing. The couple goes to a new town. They have to rent an Airbnb, and it's very calculated. The people have already been in the house. They didn't know it was going to be these specific people. They were just waiting for the next ones. So this one doesn't seem so much like it was a stranger, but it could be. There's like, we'll see. We'll keep going with the case, and you guys can decide what you think happened. So Sue, like I said, this was pretty brutal, right? So Sue was discovered lying on her side, laying next to the couch, nude from the waist down, and gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear. And they secured that in her mouth with tape, too. So it wasn't just like they shoved that in. They taped it all in with duct tape as well.
Damn.
Yeah. Then she had also been stabbed in the chest, and her throat was stabbed horizontally. So the report doesn't say slit. They say stabbed. Yeah. And the wound went so deep that it actually nicked her spine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there was that. And then on the side of her head, there was an imprint actually matching like some type of BB gun or pellet gun. Which makes you think of a younger person, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think if it was a grown adult, they would have used like an actual rifle.
A real gun.
Mm-hmm. Little John, his throat was slashed. And then Dana, he had multiple head injuries. And he was strangled to death manually, not with like anything else. I don't know. So John and Dana had both suffered blunt force trauma to their heads caused by one or more hammers. The autopsies determined that Sue and John both died from the knife wounds and blunt force trauma, and Dana's cause of death was asphyxiation, so he was just strangled to death.
Damn, so basically the mom and the kid got stabbed and hit with the hammer, right? Mm-hmm. And then they say this kid walked in on them getting murdered and then got strangled.
Yeah, I have no idea. I just want to know what happened. But then you keep in mind, there was 3 surviving people from this. Those kids were there, and they're old enough to remember. So if any of them ever talked, like, maybe they know what happened. Who knows? Because they were young, so they might have been afraid. But, I don't know. All of it's crazy. In the initial investigation, Sheila and the Seabolt family, which is the people that Sheila was staying at their house that night, right?
Yeah.
They said they heard no commotion during the night. A different couple that was living in the number 16 house said that they got woken up at 1:15 a.m., by what sounded like muffled screaming. Here's where the suspect comes into play.
Okay.
So Martin Smart, remember, Justin Smart is the kid who stayed there, remember?
Yeah.
So Martin Smart, he was a neighbor. He claimed that a claw hammer had just all of a sudden up and gone missing from his house. In addition to interviewing the Smarts, right, the detectives interviewed numerous other people, like just in the town, neighbors, all that stuff, including the members of the Seabolt family. They said that they recalled seeing a green van parked over at Sue's house around 9 p.m. that night.
Ooh.
Then Justin here, he started offering up some more stories. This is why Justin just makes me feel sus the whole time. So I know he was only 12, so you can't really take his word for it, right? Yeah. But Justin said different things about that evening in general. He said that he had dreams about the murders, but he had like details of the murders in his dreams. Dreams, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In later accounts of what happened, he also, under hypnosis, claimed to have seen Sue hanging out with 2 men. So they even hypnotized this kid, dude.
I don't think they hypnotized him, but I think the dad, he conditioned him. You know,
I agree.
It's like those movies where it's like a cult. They condition the kids to think what they're doing is right. And I think in this situation, he could have done the same thing to this kid.
I think that's completely possible. Another weird part is that based on Justin's descriptions, 2 sketches were made of the men that he saw with Sue, apparently, right? They were produced by a guy named Harlan. It was a man that really didn't have any artistic ability at all, and he had no training in forensic sketching.
But they're like, he might have looked like this and it was just a stick figure.
Yeah, no, like these are the drawings. I have them right here and I'll post them for you guys. So that's them. It was never explained, though, why, with the Justice Department helping and the FBI and everything, they have the top forensic artists in the world, you know, they just let some amateur dude who volunteers for the police sometimes draw up the sketches of these guys.
Sketchy, right?
Yes. And so that's one of the reasons, like, I would call that a mess up by the police department. Don't know.
Definitely.
Well, in press releases that were given out with the sketches, the suspects were described as in their late 20s to 30s. One was between 5'11" to 6'2", tall with dark blonde hair, and the other between 5'6" and 5'10", with black greased hair. Both wore gold-framed glasses. Sunglasses, by the way. It's not even just regular glasses. Sunglasses.
Sunglasses? Damn.
So, I don't know. A lot of people started all these rumors, too. Like, was it a ritualistic killing? Was it motivated by drug trafficking? Was it an accident? Like, was it part of the strangers? That kind of thing.
For sure.
So, that all struck up a ton of stuff, too. And here's another thing. Now we'll talk a little bit about Tina. You know way more on the Tina stuff than I do. But I'll say her disappearance was initially investigated by the FBI.
Yeah.
And they thought it was just a possible abduction, right? Although it was reported on April 29th, 1981, that the FBI had, and I quote, backed off because they said that the California State Department of Justice they were doing an adequate job, so we don't think the FBI presence is necessary anymore.
Isn't that convenient in California, too?
Well, then they had like a whole grid pattern search area set up. It was covering 5-mile radius around that house. They used police dogs and obviously found nothing. So on April 11th, 1984, which is like basically 3 years exactly, that's when a bottle collector actually found part of her skull and jaw. That's when they realized, oh, well, this might be her.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, it gets even worse.
Yeah.
Because they announced the discovery of the remains, right?
For sure.
And then the county sheriff's office received an anonymous call that said, hey, those are Tina Sharp's. It was an anonymous call, and it was not documented in any of the stuff.
I know what you're talking about. It was after they reopened the case in 2013. They got a call. They found this call in the evidence bin all the way in the bottom, and they released it. And basically, he was saying, hey, that girl that was missing from Cabin 28? Isn't that the same girl that was never found in Plumas County?
Yeah.
And that's when they were like, it's Tina. It clicked. The detective, Sheriff Greg, he thinks that that's one of the accomplices that actually called in that probably murdered Tina or was helping with what happened at Cabin 28.
That's totally possible, dude. That makes a lot of sense. Well, in 2004, the house itself was demolished.
Yeah. It no longer stands, guys.
Yeah. Nope. They tore that thing down, dude. And then there was an article that was published in 2016. And this was by the Sacramento Bee, so I am going to quote some stuff from it.
For sure.
Martin had left Keddie and driven to Reno, Nevada, shortly after the murders. While there, he sent a letter to Marilyn ruminating on personal struggles in their marriage, which he concluded by stating, and I quote, you guys, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." So that's a little wild. He passed away in the year 2000.
For sure.
His therapist, after he passed away, came out and told the police and just everyone, he came out and he said that he had admitted to him that he killed him. That he killed Sue because him and his wife Marilyn at the time were having marriage troubles, and Sue was trying to convince Marilyn to leave him. And so he said that's why he killed her.
Okay,
but
dude.
That doesn't explain the kid.
Okay, it doesn't explain the kids, bro, but you know what you just said? I have a theory for you that I thought about when we were reading this, is that what you just said, I was just trying to convince him to leave him.
Yeah.
But what if Glennie Sue was having an affair with Lauren Smart, and let's just say things weren't going the way they wanted, and we always talk about when serial killers go crazy, how if it's the woman only kills like one person, or let's say like it hits the husband, but brutally hits the husband. But when it's the guy kills the whole family. What if that just happened? Like, he's like, my wife divorced me, and this is the closest thing I have to a family. I'm just gonna murder everyone. Maybe.
And then he left Justin alive.
Yeah. Oh, and the other kids. So maybe not that.
Yeah. Well, one of my theories was that, so they found in one of the articles, they found DNA evidence. This is in 2008. And it says that they found DNA evidence that was recovered from a piece of tape at the crime scene, and it matched that of a known living suspect, which means there's a suspect that's alive, and the 2 that they had already picked as suspects are both dead. So who?
Yeah.
And one of my ideas on it was, well, what if it was Justin? Like, what if Justin had something to do with it? Because
like
maybe
we were saying, he was conditioned. He could have been conditioned to help out with the murders.
Or like, what if he heard it? Because there was another interview, and I think it was Marilyn who said that, like, Justin's a super light sleeper. He wakes up for anything. So what if he did wake up, he walked out and he saw, oh shoot, my dad might get in trouble. I need to help him. Or, what if they were all asleep and the other 2 kids followed them out? So Justin was like, oh, I'm going to hurt them so they don't get my dad in trouble.
Maybe.
And then the other 2 were still asleep, and then Justin walked back in there and slept, dude.
Okay, dude. And then another thing that I know. When they demolished the cabin, right?
Mm-hmm.
They found more evidence. Like you said, they found a hammer in a pond in front of the cabin, literally.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And like a broken knife.
I read something that said that where the hammer was placed had to be there, like put there intentionally, and that it wasn't like an accidental finding.
And the thing is that the reason it was only placed right there at the pond, let's just say, is because they were walking out and they thought they weren't, obviously they didn't get caught, but he was just like, who's ever gonna find this? And he just threw it like right there, boom.
So Martin wasn't even the only suspect. He had like one of his best buds named John Badade, I think, or Babade. I don't know why I can't say his last name. It's spelled so weird.
Bobo.
Yeah, well, this is Bo. Yeah, John Bo. That's what we'll call him. He ended up dying in 1988, but he was one of the other suspects. Him and Martin. So, I don't know, dude. It seems pretty sus to me. And the biggest question is now, or the whole time, I guess, why did Tina get kidnapped? Why didn't Tina get killed in the living room with everyone else?
See, what I think, too, is maybe this guy wanted to be like the other famous serial killers where he kills like 3 or 4 people, becomes super famous, and then they'll come looking for me. Let's say he did that. He's like, I'll kidnap Tina, and then they'll ransom me money, and then I'll get rich. Right? Maybe a possibility like that.
Maybe.
And the people never came because, let's say, the bodies were reported, but Tina was reported missing. So no one ever came looking for her.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, you're worthless, so they just killed her.
That's possible. The other thing that investigators actually said about Tina being missing.
Yeah.
They said that they think maybe she got kidnapped because they wanted to, SA her first, and then that was the motivation behind kidnapping her, or they did do it already, and they didn't want to get caught because of their DNA or something like that.
Maybe.
So that was said in a lot of the stuff, but who knows? Who knows? There was bloody footprints that were found, and I know that Martin wrote a letter, but yeah, here it is. I've paid the price. I've given my flesh and blood for you. I'll gladly pay your bills. Just send them in. He sent her this huge thing, and the police actually got his DNA sample off of that letter.
Ah.
Yeah. Wild, right? I don't know.
It's like they could have done so much more back then, and they didn't. These mistakes that the police made may have cost them the case, because both these people could have been in jail or even paid for what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And people being in jail, they always rat other people, so it could have been a domino effect. But maybe, just maybe, the criminals were getting helped from the other side.
It's just a very suspicious case. You see a lot of these, and this is just based off what you see in movies and studies and stuff. It's not very often where someone breaks in and brutally murders only half the people in the house. It's not like he said, oh, those are kids, let's not kill them. Because he killed 2 kids.
Yeah.
So it's not like he left them alive because they were kids. That's the thing. That's why I think maybe those 3 stayed asleep, or those 2, and maybe Justin had something to do with it. I don't know. I read a lot of conspiracy theories online about Justin because he was 12 at the time, and that was in 1981. So in theory, he should still be alive.
That, or I just constructed this little thing in my head. You said that Sue had a little BB gun.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, what if, like you said, he waited for the kids to go to bed, Justin, and then his parents were like, right?
Yeah, what if
knock
he
on the
slept
door,
there and they were like, let us in?
Yeah, let us in. And then get the mom out, right? And then when the mom came out, he shot her in the head, the BB, and that's when they rushed her.
Well, she didn't have a BB shot in her. She only had the butt of the gun.
Oh.
So, yeah, it was like an imprint from that gun, and they matched it up with a BB/pellet gun.
See? And
Yeah.
like you said, the BB gun, who would have a BB gun? Not an adult, the kids.
Yeah, the kids. So, did he hide and then just bang on the head? Did he knock on the door and then the other 2 kids were still awake? Who knows? But something sus happened, dude. Something
sure.
real sus. So, tell us what you guys think happened. Don't forget to like and subscribe and download our episodes on Spotify.
And we appreciate you guys
Yes.
for listening.
Thank you so much.
And we out.
Yeehaw, brother.